Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar, run for the latest UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as we are seeing a really quite pleasant spell of weather setting up over the coming days. It does look like we are going to be fairly dry for the next week, maybe even slightly longer than that, and it's because high pressure is building in at the moment. Now initially we are seeing pretty chilly air masses involved, and that's why we're still going to see some frosts over the next few evenings, but come early to mid next week we are going to see milder air drifting in from the mid-Atlantic, even from the Mediterranean potentially late next week, and we are likely to see temperatures rising quite significantly up towards the mid-teens. Looks pretty much guaranteed, maybe even 16, 17, 18 degrees can't be off the cards if we do see the right synoptics. It is still a good few days away from those temperatures becoming a possibility, so still some change, but from now until then, it does look like it's going to remain fairly dry and fairly pleasant, warming up every single day before it could peak later on next week. As we look at the longer range, we see that very well established within the model output, this big rise in upper air temperatures over the next 3, 4, 5 days and very dry conditions, but we are already seeing an end in sight. We never thought this high pressure was going to stick around for too long. It is sticking around for a little bit longer than we thought a couple of days ago, but we're already seeing lower pressure trying to rattle in off the Atlantic come the following weekend, so around 8-9 days time. It does look quite likely low pressure is going to come back in, setting us up for a more unsettled pattern and potentially chillier once again. Not guaranteed, but that is looking like the most likely outcome at this stage. So to remember, if you enjoy my videos, do like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, to start on the live radar, you can see not too much is going on today. Lots of dry conditions, a few odd showers coming in from the north and the west, and we are still going to see some transient bands of precipitation moving in, as we do see a few weak weather fronts pushing in. As I said though, mainly high pressure dominant, so those weather fronts are going to lose the majority of their intensity as they do move in, which means that they will slowly degrade away with very little precipitation outside of those far northern and western areas. Now, do look at the temperatures this evening. Recording this around 10:30. Already temperatures dropping away quite rapidly. A widespread frost is expected this evening. Again, not too unusual with high pressure towards the latter part of winter. We still have fairly long nights. So yeah, temperatures dropping away quite substantially. But as I said, into next week, those frosts will degrade away. Just could be pretty chilly over the next few days with the cold air still in place. Now, if you have a look at the latest UKV, you can see as we head over the coming hours, it remains very dry and into Friday. Lots of sunshine around for England and Wales. Further north and westwards, perhaps a bit more cloud pushing in and a few odd showers. And then you can see one of these transient weather fronts pushing in through Friday evening. It looks a little bit intense initially, a bit of a squall feature within it, but it very quickly degrades away as it moves in for Saturday morning. And for most into Saturday afternoon, the biggest impacts from that weather front will just be a bit more cloud, so a little bit more mundane there, but hopefully some sunshine on either side of this weather front. And of course, this weather front could break away a little bit faster than anticipated, and if that does occur, then we could see a bit of sunshine for the first day of meteorological spring. As we push into Sunday, still very dry, a bit more in the way of sunshine into the afternoon for southern areas. Cloud and a bit of rain emerging for the northwest, but again, degrades away, comes to nothing really into Monday morning. And again, another spell of potentially heavy rain moves through on Tuesday, but really only for Scotland, with most of us staying in the dry conditions. And you can see if we look at the mean sea level pressure, high pressure is firmly building in and the wind direction is shifting to more of a southwesterly or even southerly, and that will encourage those milder, warmer air masses to push in. And you can see from the upper air temperatures here, you can start to see they're getting dragged in from the west southwest, but at the moment it will take a bit of time to push in. Not seeing anything too exceptional in the UKV yet, but it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week where things could get pretty warm indeed. Now, to look at the temperatures, you can see overnight tonight, temperatures rapidly falling away towards freezing or below freezing. And into tomorrow afternoon, not a particularly warm day, temperatures peaking around the 5 to 8 degree mark. As we move into Saturday, look at that, another very cold morning. You can see temperatures widely down towards freezing or below freezing for those southern and eastern areas. Further north as westwards with cloud around, a little bit milder. And into Saturday afternoon, still pretty chilly, 7 to 9 degrees. Into Sunday, another frost occurring quite widely, where we do see clearer skies away from the weather fronts, and get into Sunday afternoon, 8 to 11 degrees. Into Monday, temperatures dropping away again to close towards freezing in the far south. But as we head into the afternoon, temperatures rising slightly higher, more around the 9 to 12 degree mark. And then slowly into Tuesday, temperatures not dropping away as cold overnight with the milder air aloft. And into Tuesday afternoon, temperatures rising slightly higher, 12 to maybe 14 degrees. And slowly, as we progress towards Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, temperatures could get up towards 15, 16. That's looking pretty likely. Maybe even 17 or 18 is potentially on the cards. We are still, of course, very early on in the year. It's the first week of March, so we can't expect too much, but the possibility is there. You can see 20 degrees in March. We saw 20 degrees in February back in 2019, late 2019. So it is possible. Again, we're not seeing the extreme synoptics that produce that, but just shows you that we can see some early spring warmth. Now, if you look at the latest GFS now, you can see high pressure building in over the coming days, coming a bit of a strain over the weekend with those weather fronts pushing in from the northwest, but generally high pressure firmly in control. And you can see through the latter part of next week, it pushes slightly further eastwards, and that draws up those very mild air masses for a time late next week. That's where we could see those very warm temperatures before eventually the westerly winds do get unlocked. So as I said, fairly strong confidence here that beyond sort of day 7, day 8, and day 9, we do see a fairly strong westerly wind pushing back in, and you can see very unsettled there out towards 384 hours. High pressure never fully disappears, so I wouldn't be surprised if another spell of high pressure did emerge. But in the meantime, high pressure does look like it will lose a little bit of its intensity longer term. Fortunately, the tropospheric polar vortex, or at least remains of it, as it slowly degrades away through March. Of course, there is the risk of a sudden stratospheric warming occurring. That's something we need to keep an eye on. Might have another video out about that in the near future. But at the moment, the tropospheric polar vortex is sticking towards northern Canada and Greenland. If that were to push southwards, then we could go very stormy. If it was to push eastwards into Europe, then we could go very cold. But at the moment, it's all staying well to our north, which means the jet stream is over the top of us or to our north, meaning generally we're on the milder side. And especially as we're going to see this next week, we're on the drier side as well. Now, if you look at the GM, again, broadly very similar. High pressure continue to dominate into next week. As we head towards the middle to latter part of next week, that high pressure moves slightly further eastwards. We do draw up a southerly wind for a time, very mild indeed there, into Thursday and even potentially into Friday as well. But then, look what happens to the high pressure. It moves towards Iceland, and it attempts to push an easterly wind in. Now, initially, this easterly is actually fairly mild, but there is some cold air pushing into Scandinavia that could head our way. So that's something to keep a very close eye on. Very interesting from the GM here. None of the other runs are showing it, but it just shows you how quickly things could develop, and that, yes, even though we are going to see some fairly spring-like conditions in the next week, could very quickly snap back to some late-season cold. So yeah, we need to keep a close eye on that. Finally, if we compare it to the latest ECMWF, this is actually a really fine spring-like run today. Again, high pressure firmly in control into next week. That southerly push into the middle to latter part of next week. And eventually, we do see the low pressure systems off the Atlantic starting to push back in. Again, not dominating, but just nowhere near as much high pressure involved as we did have in the prior days. And you see this, if we put on the temperature deviation, look at this, upper air temperatures by next Wednesday, when we're expecting the temperatures to really start ramping up around 8 to 10 degrees above average. Now, after we finish by looking at the latest ensembles, you can see this here. We are still slightly below average, upper air temperatures still hovering around the -5 line. That's why we're still seeing frosts in the next few days, and it's still a little bit chilly. However, as we head through the weekend, the upper air temperatures cross from below average to above average and then steadily climb. So by the middle of next week, by around next Wednesday, Thursday, the upper air temperatures are very mild. And you can see they're up towards 7 or 8 degrees at 850 HP, around 10 degrees above average. There is a drop-off in around 8, 9, 10 days' time, back towards average or even below average with an increase in precipitation. But for the time being, it does look like that is remaining in that longer range period. We'll have to keep a close eye on how that deviates around. But yeah, for the time being, 7, maybe 8 or 9 days of very dry and eventually something a bit warmer. You see the dew points really flipping from around freezing at the moment to maybe mid to high single digits next week, indicating that real shift in air masses from cold and dry to more milder and a bit more moist. And if we do have a look at those 2 meter temperatures, again, we do see this steady rise. You can always just put a straight line on those top tips of the day, and you can see it's 7 or 8 degrees through tomorrow. And by next week, late next week, we're looking at 14, 15. And of course, the models sometimes do underdo those top temperatures because we're looking at midday and 6 p.m. observations here, whereas the peak this time of year is probably around the 2 p.m. point, maybe 3 p.m. Probably more towards 2 p.m. because of the early sunsets this time of year. So around 2 p.m. is when we actually see our peak, so it probably would be slightly higher than this, maybe 15, 16, of course, locally could get slightly higher before a bigger drop off beyond that. But generally speaking, can't get much better than what we're seeing over the next week. Pretty crisp and cold initially, but still very dry, turning much milder and drier into the longer term. And that does agree quite well with the ECMWF ensembles. If we look at the midnight run, big rise into next week, and again delaying that precipitation even here out towards day 10. So in the far southeast and far south, perhaps there's some signs here from the ensembles that high pressure could hang on a little bit longer. I doubt it further northwards, but definitely further southwards looks like a real possibility. So anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure you enjoy the next week. Some proper early spring sunshine. All so often we see cold weather as we head into early March, and we're all complaining as, you know, we're seeing cold conditions, but not very cold conditions, not cold enough for snow or anything. And I think a lot of people are in agreement with me where it comes to this time of year. We kind of just want it to warm up a little bit. We've had cold, damp, horrible conditions for the last sort of 4-5 months, going back to kind of October time. That's where we see that proper flip, that big step change towards autumnal conditions, as recent Septembers have been pretty warm, to be fair. So yeah, definitely looking forward to something a bit sunny and brighter, and definitely seeing that in this early portion of March 2025. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.